Good starter. Kiwi Robbie Francevic, a few problems there and a big question mark over Robbie at this stage.
They've had a little turbo trouble in practice earlier today.
So we're about 20 seconds away from the start of what should be a very, very interesting round 8 of the Australian Touring Car Championship before an absolute capacity crowd at Lakeside near Brisbane. About 10 seconds away. Who will win the start, Richards or will it be Johnson? And racing. Johnson has got it sideways and he's won the start. Richards has been gobbled up by two Commodores. Here comes the turbo and Crichton moves up on the inside and takes Richards on the inside as they run down to the carousel for the first time. We can guarantee you we have a race going now for round 8 of the touring car title, the carousel. Queensland's own Dick Johnson comes out of the bend, leading it sideways, and you should hear the crowd on the hill. They've all erupted. Brock, a lightning start. Perkins is next. Listen to the crowd as Francevic drops in behind them too, and under the bridge comes Dick Johnson, a little sideways, but he's heading up to Motorcraft and leading.
Johnson all pumped up, and if he's going to win one round of the Australian Touring Car Championship, then this is it. Francevic drops back behind the BMW. Car number 7, Larry Perkins in second place, Brock in third in 05. Francevic seems to have overcome the problems they had in yesterday's practice. Then Masterton, Bond in there as well. Keogh, Tony Longhurst recovering from a dreadful start in the 323 BMW.
Across the strike, Dick Johnson leads. Perkins in second place, followed by Brock, then Jim Richards in car number 62.
Oh, look at Larry. Back end of the Commodore, very taily as he came to the right-hander at the carousel. Look at Richards getting onto the back of Brock. Mustang leading two Commodores and BMW into their second lap of round 8 of the Australian Touring Car Championship.
Well, after that slow start, Richards really does have to get back into the thick of things early, particularly on this circuit. He can't afford to stay back in the pack and be in danger of being shuffled even further back. He's got to stay right on the heels of the leading division.
There he comes up now on the tail of Peter Brock. At the same spot only a lap or so back, he left Robbie Francevic thinking. A little big squeeze there on Francevic. Started off to be a little, turned out to be a big one. Down the roller coaster, Peter Brock 0-5. And he's holding third at the moment. Series leader Jim Richards behind him. Johnson up front leading it from Larry Perkins. And then back behind them we can see Rob Francevic, Steve Masterton, Neville Crichton and Colin Bond. They're the next in line. There's where the scrap is. Richards trying to work to the outside. Now set him up for a good pass here on the inside as they come through the bend. BMW gets up here on the inside. Brock has to give way and Richards is through. And a great drive that from Richards. Richards now is going to go chasing Larry Perkins.
Richards has gone for a slightly softer compound this weekend than the two Commodores. It's a Pirelli D5 radial slip tyre, which they normally only use in qualifying, but they feel that the circuit here is sufficiently quick enough and easy enough on tyres to be able to get with it. So the BMW I would expect to be very fast.
Checking the order up front, Dick Johnson leads from Larry Perkins, third spot held down by Jim Richards, then Peter Brock. Robbie Francevic is next in the Volvo, then Steve Masterton.
And I'll guarantee you that Jim Richards is trying. Not often you see Jim with the tail out, but he is trying to pull the gap back on Johnson, keeping in mind when they qualified yesterday, only a tenth of a second, the split between Johnson and, of course, Jim Richards.
Dick finished second at this round last year in the wet, and he would desperately like to put on the big win in front of an enormous crowd here today. And I think that just about every one of them is up at the moment and cheering Dick Johnson along the way.
The Johnson victory, of course, could open the Touring Car Championship right up.
There's the shot as they go beneath the bridge. Just listen to the cars. They are on full hoop as they go under the bridge, some of them sideways. Johnson, though, coming up to the top of Motorcraft.
Francevic hanging in there as well on the Volvo.
Down the roller coaster through Castrol. Johnson another one.
They're still hanging over the fence and out of the trees, cheering themselves hoarse.
Here's Larry Perkins now with Jim Richards coming up close behind him. They run down to the kink at the left-hander.
1.5 seconds between Johnson and Perkins.
They're leaving Brock behind in fourth place. Quite a gap opening up there.
Jim putting the front across the curb that time, particularly if he's running soft tyres. but he's managed to pull in Perkins.
A number of the leading teams this weekend have had puncture problems, and they won't want to get off the circuit or there will be problems.
Beneath the bridge, coming down to Hungary Corner, the run then uphill, and here comes Richards. Beautiful pass on the inside. But he lost the start, but he's made good every passing manoeuvre so far. Over the top of Motorcraft, and now there's only a little bit of daylight between this man and the fellow leading the race. You'll see the split as they come onto the start-finishing straight. Johnson leading, Jim Richards the series leader in second place, Larry Perkins is third, Brock is fourth, and back behind them Robbie Francevic, Steve Masterton, Crichton and Colin Bond.
Still 1.5 seconds between first and second. Now Johnson, the man who has to try and fend off Jimmy Richards through the carousel.
Johnson maintains this is where he is at a real advantage on this circuit. Through the S's, down the back of the course, under the bridge, and then up over Motorcraft.
Well, he's grabbing fifth gear just prior to the bridge and holds it firmly into the car right down to this left-hander at Hungary. And I stood up there on Friday and Saturday watching practice, and it's breathtaking.
To the top of Motorcraft Hill, the Palmer Tube Mills Motorcraft Mustang V8, Dick Johnson at the wheel.
And now it's tumble down deck.
The Castrol again.
They had a few electrical problems with the Mustang in practice, which they've overcome very well. And the car is handling like a dream.
Motor running strongly.
Francevic still hanging quite nicely in fourth place behind Peter Brock. And they can see that that gap is closing between Johnson and Richards.
Well, Richards has done so well after being slow off the mark, and in fact he was side by side with teammate Neville Crichton going into the first corner, and Crichton's now back in sixth spot.
Coming down to three-quarter, the left-hander. Before they rise to the top of Motorcraft Hill. How hard is Richards trying? Over the top.
Richards can't afford for Dick Johnson to score too many points, because on the corrected table, because Jim Richards has had an excellent finishing record so far this year, he must drop his worst performance, which so far has only been a fifth, as Larry Perkins gets out in the grass. So just 40 points separates them at the moment. Richards can't afford any mistakes at all. The gap continues to close between Johnson and Richards. Peter Brock a little closer to the back of Larry Perkins, and Francevic lurking in fifth.
And they've dropped off, Masterton and Crichton and Bond.
Coming down towards the bridge again. Richards putting everything into this. He's gaining on Johnson. There's the gap. To Hungry Corner again. Trouble is trying to pick a spot as we take race cam, and we'll position the camera out the back window. You can see the gap between Johnson and Richards as they run downhill.
There's an interesting battle on in the smaller cars too, Mike, between the Alfa of Colin Bond and the BMW of Tony Longhurst. So there's a few battles raging out there.
Actually, Longhurst's got the upper hand at the moment. He's ahead of Bond on the track.
This is the big battle at the moment. It's for the race lead. And Richards all the time getting closer to Johnson. I think Johnson's going to hand this one to Jim on a platter. Coming out of the carousel again. Johnson all the road. You can hear the crowd on the hill. They have not stopped cheering here. But Richards keeps working away.
There's a sign immediately across from our commentary point that states that Dick Johnson walks on water.
Well,
there's plenty of it at Lakeside.
Here we come. Here's Richards setting him up for the pass and takes Johnson. Yes, he does. Jim Richards. Now we take race cam with Johnson as they go to the top of Motorcraft. And the man that has come from behind on a couple of occasions in the Touring Car Championship has done it again here today at Lakeside. To Castrol. Richards leading. Johnson in second. Perkins in third as they come past an absolute full house. There's the two Commodores back behind.
The BMW is spending a lot of time going sideways at the moment, and Jim's going to have to be fairly careful of his tyres in this race.
Johnson's not going to let him get away.
Johnson will harry him all the way. Dick has said that his car will be as strong at the finish as he hoped it would be at the start. Well, it's been fairly strong at the start, and he's giving Jim an idea that Jim is not going to be able to take the lead and cool it for a few laps.
Says an awful lot, doesn't it, for Jim Richards' ability to be up front yet again in this 8th round of the Australian Touring Car Championship. Car 62, Jim Richards in the BMW leads from Dick Johnson and Larry Perkins in the first of the Mobile Dealer Team Commodores, holding down 3rd place at this stage in round 8 at Lakeside. Lead Dick Johnson, and back in 6th place, 6th and 7th place on the track, we've got Colin Bond and Tony Longhurst staging a little war of their own in the under 3 litre class. That's Neville Crichton too, in behind them. Just goes to show you how well these two cars are going up front.
Yes, and I don't think Neville's going to be a very happy man as he locks up a back right, going into the right-hander of the carousel, because he needs points in this championship to be able to hold out Dick Johnson. That's the real tussle in the points table at the moment between Crichton and Johnson, and being stuck behind his teammate in the 323 BMW, I would think is going to make Neville say a few things at the end of the day. But the two of them locked in battle at the moment as the news comes through that Peter Brock has moved to 3rd placing in the race. But look at Longhurst. A great performance from this 6-cylinder fuel-injected BMW.
This could be the sleeper car, certainly at Amaru Park for the next round of the Touring Car Championship. Bond doing a good job in the 26 car. Longhurst has tended to be just a touch untidy on a couple of the corners. And Brighton ranged up alongside of him a lap or so ago and had the ground taken well and truly out from underneath him.
We mentioned that Brock was up to 3rd, having got by Larry Perkins. I think Robbie Francevic might be in the process of doing the same thing too. And up front, it's still a great battle between Richards and Johnson. What a race this is.
Well, there's the gap between Jim Richards and Dick Johnson. It continues as we head up the hill again. We'll show you how close these cars are, in fact, when they drop over the top and come down to Castrol.
Richards with Johnson in pursuit. Johnson really is hanging on desperately there. Cannot afford to let the BMW get away too far, although he does here down the main straight take the left-hand kink, and you can see the gap opening up. Slight touch on the brakes. Peter Williamson there in car 77, the Toyota Supra in the pits. Puzzled looks. They haven't found the cause of the problem yet, and he's going to be in there for some little time, and you cannot afford to be in the pits at all in these rounds of the Touring Car Championship. 35 laps of this circuit, 2.41 kilometres. It's a sprint race.
11th fastest qualifier, hugging race cab. As we follow the race lead and the squabble that's still going on it up to the top, and of course back in the pack while this goes on, Robbie Francevic, who is running 4th at the moment in car number 21 with some handling problems yesterday. I don't know whether Rob's been able to cure them coming down the hill in the Mark Petch Volvo Turbo.
Not only handling problems, but they had some big turbo hassles overnight. They had a problem with the wastegate on the turbo, which has been causing them headaches, as Peter Williamson rejoins the race.
I don't think Rob Francevic expected him there. Threw a bit of dust up.
They've had a complete restructure within the team, and the man who now heads the engineering side of it is Wayne Eckersley, who was associated with Alan Jones and the Williams team a couple of years ago, and Alan took out the World Championship. Since then, Wayne has moved to Queensland and worked for Bap Romano, and has now moved back to Sydney to work with Petch and head up this Volvo Assault.
Obviously, there's something amiss with Larry Perkins' Commodore. After holding down 3rd, team boss Peter Brock's got by him. Now Francevic has got by him, relegating Perkins to 5th.
You can see how busy Rob is at the wheel.
No giving him a sightseeing, is there?
No, giving him a super ride over the top of Motorcraft and coming down the roller coaster.
They were testing 17-inch wheels on this car on Friday and Saturday, and they have been, as we look here through the eyes of race cam, at just how close Dick Johnson is to the back of Jim Richards, through the kink along the main straight up to the carousel, and Dick Johnson back here with a real chance for the lead.
He's jumped over the curb there, but keeping in mind, Johnson said all the way along he's got a set of tyres and a car that will handle and not go off. How close do you want it, folks, in the Touring Car Championship? Mustang-bounded Dick Johnson zeroing back in on Jimmy Richards. As soon as Richards gets a little straight, the horsepower comes into play. but in the tricky little bits, Johnson's Mustang closes up appreciably. Here they come up Motorcraft Hill again. Richards a little straighter this time. He's been throwing the car all over the racetrack and getting it sideways in the opening laps.
And the harder Johnson pushes him in these corners, the bigger toll it's going to take on his tyres.
That's exactly what Johnson's working to, the game plan. Try and see if he can pressure him, make him wear his tyres, and then hopefully slip by towards the end of the event. Brock is still in third, as you can see, back behind that.
Yes, and he's closing that gap. And Brock is now just 2.9 seconds behind the leading bunch.
Coming up on one of the Toyotas as they come out of the carousel. It's part of the course guarantee to take your breath away for a moment or so. Now watch Richards, yes, driver has moved across and signalled Richards through. Johnson said has gone along for the ride and once again keeps the pressure well and truly on Richards as they come up to Hungry Corner, the run up to Motorcraft. Over the top of Motorcraft once again, and the gap between Richards and Dick Johnson remains about the same. Open racetrack in front of them, and there's Brock and of course Robbie Francevic in the turbo Volvo. Not too far back.
Been a bit of a stop-start race for Francevic. He made a lightning start, dropped back. Now he's making another move that's brought him up to fourth place just behind Brock. But the real battle is right here.
And Brock continues to close up onto the back of Johnson.
Well, if it turns into a three-way go, won't things be exciting? There's not all that much room to manoeuvre around here.
Just over 2.5 seconds. So Peter has picked up a couple of tenths in the last lap.
Richards opening a gap a little on Johnson in the last lap.
Looked to me like we saw Steve Masterson's car off to the side of the track back there as well, just prior to the left-hander at Hungary.
Checking placings after 18 laps of round 8 of the Touring Car Championship. Jim Richards in front, but narrowly from Dick Johnson, with Peter Brock holding down third place. And as Dick Johnson continues to pressure Jim Richards for the lead after, pressure is right, after 20 laps of this 35-lap round of the Australian Touring Car Championship. Peter Brock is getting ever closer with every lap, and Francevic is right on his tail as we again take the race cam view. Johnson pursuing Richards down the main straight. Peter Brock, as I said, in third place and closing, and look right behind him, Robbie Francevic.
Well, Robbie's making a move. Look at this down the inside of Brock.
Oh, Brock says, hey, shut this gate.
Well, Brock knows he's got a Kiwi. Oh, and Brock has locked one up as he goes into the carousel.
Don't tell me Francevic drove over the tyre valve again.
Coming out of the corner. So Peter Brock now has Robbie Francevic right behind him. Johnson is still putting the pressure, of course, on Jimmy Richards.
2.3 seconds between second and third at the moment, so Brock continues to close on the leaders, and Francevic giving him heaps of curry at the moment.
That brake lock up from Brock, I hope that's not an omen of any problems to come, because Larry Perkins locked a brake up earlier as he went off and managed to get it back under control. Here's Brock, 0.5, leads them down the hill to Castrol. Brock under a little bit of pressure at this stage. The gap, there's one of Brock's crew just checking the time. They'd be somewhat concerned that this Kiwi has come from nowhere with a car that wasn't handling yesterday and has been the big improver in the race.
So that was Neil Burns, the engine man from the dealer team, who's been building very strong and fast and competitive V8s for Brock for a long time, but they're going to have to do something about these flying BMWs and Mustangs at this circuit, and indeed this Volvo, which pressures in fourth place.
Francevic getting right behind Brock now, putting the pressure on beneath the bridge. Despite some handling problems, Robbie's done a heck of a job in this race so far. All concentration as Francevic. Oh, says, come on, Peter, if you can't cut the pace, let's get with it. Now, that would have upset Brock no end. There's not too many that can stick a bit of a car into Peter Brock and say, you're holding me up, and I think that'll either stern no end, or Brock's going to make this the widest Lakeside that Robbie Francevic has ever seen. and there'll be words between these two after the race.
Yeah, they're not great lovers.
There's Kent Bagent with problems. Car been taken back to the pit area as the scrap continues. Coming up on a slower car.
Well, this is one area where Brock might get just a little breathing space. No, not at all. Francevic dived straight through the gap as well.
And Colin Bond in 5th placing in the GTV6 Alfa Romeo at present.
Yes, and Neville Crichton has displaced Tony Longhurst as well in the leading division. Here
we go over the top of Motorcraft. Last time they were a bit closer than that, particularly the exit. So Brock holding down 3rd. Study of concentration in the 05 Mobile Team Commodore, and Francevic closing up behind him. Johnson still in 2nd, and the race leader, of course, is Jim Richards. They're coming up on Jim Keogh, Melbourne solicitor, that's been following the trail very, very successfully.
And leads the STP Rookie of the Year award so far. And that gap between 2nd and 3rd is now out to 4.1 seconds. So Peter Brock is dropping away from the back at the moment of Dick Johnson.
Larry Perkins, who was holding down 3rd place in the race at one stage in car 7, is now back in 7th place, behind Tony Longhurst, behind Colin Bond.
To hungry corner again. Francevic is
very hungry.
Is very hungry indeed, right behind Peter Brock, to the top of Motorcraft. They were both gaining on Richards and Dick Johnson at one stage. Now they've settled down to have their own private duel. I think they've taken a little of the heat off the race leaders, who you can see disappearing away down the front straight.
Two great duels going on here, Richards versus Johnson and Brock versus Francevic. But on the track, it's Jim Richards still leading after 25 laps of today's round of the Touring Car Championship from Dick Johnson and Peter Brock.
We're riding with Race Cam and Dick Johnson still running 2nd and keeping the pressure, of course, on race leader Jim Richards. Been a very busy time. That's why we haven't worried Dick Johnson. But Dick, can you hear us?
Yeah, mate, I can hear you.
Don't want to interrupt you. With about 7 laps to go, do you think there's a chance here you might be able to pull it?
Well, you never know. It's got to the stage where his tyres look a bit slippery from here.
You said earlier you thought your car would be as strong at the finish as it would be at the start. You still hold to that?
Yeah, well, hopefully it will be, because everything seems to be fine at the moment. The water's on 180 and the oil pressure's up around 80-odd pound. The brake pedal's there.
All right, I think we'll let you go, Dick. Good luck. We'll let you get back to the race.
Oh, mate, it's those Kiwis. That's the problem.
Yeah, well, the problem is Robbie Francevic's running 4th at the moment as well. So, you know, the Kiwi's doing reasonably well.
Mate, that's why I won't let them near my new ICL computer.
Why's that?
Because there's too much liquid paper over the screen.
Go back and chase Richards.
Thanks, pal.
Bye. So Dick Johnson still with a one-liner in the middle of the fight. Richards at this stage has a little bit of a gap on Dick Johnson. And there it is.
Looks like he's pulled one on Francevic too.
Yes, Brock a couple of car lengths over Robbie Francevic as they wind down into the final 5 laps of the FM 104 Round 8 Australian Touring Car Championship here at Lakeside. What a race it's been. Brock goes through as Johnson tries to set up a late charge now on Jim Richards.
Still plenty of time for things to happen in this race. 5 laps now, in fact, remaining.
Gap Johnson to Brock is now 3.8 seconds. So it fell away to greater than that and is now coming down again.
There's Brock. One, of course, the opening, his opening race for the series at Sandown in February. Had some problems at a couple of the other races, managed to pull a quick time, went to the race at Keilor, was very, very competitive.
Mike Quinn just pulled off a circuit in the background in the Toyota Sprinter. Brock's just come back from a 2 or 3 week trip overseas, having visited Europe and America, and believes he has some good bits coming. Commodore.
He's lost a good bit too, off the left rear there.
There's the front-running 4 in the race, Brock 3rd, and of course Robbie Francevic back there in 4th in the silver Volvo. As far as the Queensland race supporters here today, let me tell you, it seems like there's about 20,000 of them here. they obviously want that man in 17 to take the lead away from the man in the black car, and that's Jim Richards at this stage. As they swing down the back part of the course, there's Johnson working again at trying to pull back that deficit. Larry Perkins across there on the right side of the racetrack with obviously some problems in slowing. Coming up on one of the slower cars to the top of Motorcraft Hill. And Richards very, very comfortable indeed in the black BMW.
Russell Worthington indicating that he wants Richards to go by on the right-hand side. So Jim at the moment looks to be reasonably comfortable. It's a question now of who's got the best sprint left in their tyres. Gap is 0.8 of a second. And Jim having a security tap on the brakes just to bring the pressure up before they come to the right-hander of the carousel.
Well, 3 laps, maybe 2 3/4 left to go for Johnson to see if he can put some pressure on. There's Larry Perkins with some problems in the pit area for a tyre change.
Yeah, so that's a little unusual. Larry opted for Dunlops earlier this morning. And yes, it's them again on the car. So perhaps a different compound, or maybe the opportunity now to do some testing. Wayne just gets the front left back on. No, Larry's out of the car. So it's terminal.
Well, they were going through the exercise, perhaps, so they have a problem there. So Larry Perkins drops out. This man hasn't, though. Jimmy Richards, 62. Leads back onto the straight again. Coming down to the line with 2 laps remaining in the 8th round of the Touring Car Championship.
That time through Jim Richards extending the lead to 1.8 seconds.
So 1.8 the gap with about 1 3/4 laps to run. Looking very, very strong at this stage is Jim Richards.
The car looks to be a little more stable on the road now than it was earlier.
Well, the car has responded well to the demands placed on it by Richards, who really had to use it to throw it around the racetrack to come back from 4th. He did that very, very successfully indeed. Heading up Motorcraft Hill, and Jim Richards in 62 will drop down on the approach now to Castrol Corner, still with that same gap over Dick Johnson. Peter Brock in 3rd, Robbie Francevic is 4th. Colin Bond, of course, in 5th place. Neville Crichton in 6th. Across the line with 1 lap remaining. 62, driven by Jimmy Richards, JTS BMW, heading down to the carousel for the final time. Dab of the brakes, gets it set, the balance right for the turn, and comes out of the carousel. Very clean, unruffled highs from Jimmy Richards, the man who's dominated the Touring Car Championship Series so far. Goes beneath the bridge, dropping into the left-hander, coming down to Hungary Corner, then the approach to the top of Motorcraft Hill. Johnson has given the fans here today a race to remember. He's felt the pinch against the BMWs on some of the other circuits, but has put up a first-class showing here today. Down the roller coaster to Castrol for the final time, tucking into the right-hander, checkered flag at the ready. As they come down the straightaway, Dick's got a little bit sideways, but across the strike, the checkered flag will come out. So Jimmy Richards goes on to win round 8 of the Australian Touring Car Championship narrowly from Queensland's Dick Johnson, Peter Brock, and New Zealander Robbie Francevic. Quite a race between the front-running 4, and a marvellous scrap between the 62 driver and 17. Let's recap the placings for you. Round 8, the winner's gone to Jim Richards in the BMW, 2nd place to Queensland's Dick Johnson, and 3rd place to Peter Brock.